The day my husband quit his job, I thought we were finally getting our life back. That's the line I remember most. Not from him, but from myself. I said it with a kind of trembling hope, standing in our small kitchen with the scent of burnt toast hanging in the air. The kettle was still hissing, steam fogging the window above the sink. Outside, winter sunlight broke through the gray clouds, just enough to make everything look softer than it was. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, rubbing his temples like he was trying to hold his head together. His resignation letter lay folded beside his untouched coffee. He'd been with the firm for 10 years, and for the last 3, that job had been breaking him bit by bit. "I can't do it anymore, Maya," he said finally, not looking at me. "They don't value me. Every day feels like I'm suffocating." I remember reaching across the table, covering his hands with mine. "Then don't. We'll figure it out. We always do." At the time, I believed that. We'd been married for 8 years. Together, we'd survived cramped apartments, job losses, and a miscarriage that nearly tore us apart. I had learned how to stretch every dollar, how to smile when the world felt like it was shrinking around us. Daniel was the dreamer. I was the builder. He'd always said that's what he loved about me, that I kept him steady. So, when he quit, I told myself it was just another chapter. He'd find something better, something worthy of him. And for a while, that belief was enough to keep us both breathing. Those early weeks after his resignation almost felt like a vacation. Daniel cooked breakfast, pancakes with too much syrup. He started running again, cleaned the garage, even painted the front door navy blue because it reminded him of possibility. I worked double shifts at the school to make ends meet, tutoring in the evenings, keeping the bills covered. I didn't mind. He was smiling again. That smile had been gone for years. We had this ritual, Saturday night movies. He'd pick something light, like old comedies, and we'd sit with a blanket and cheap popcorn, pretending everything was fine. He'd lean against me and whisper, "You're my anchor, you know that, right?" And I'd believe him all over again. Then came Renee. She entered our lives like a slow breeze, the kind that feels harmless until it chills your bones. We met her at a charity event organized by my school. She was a freelance designer helping with the banners and stage setup. Pretty, warm, with this easy laugh that filled a room. She said she'd just moved to the area and didn't know many people. Daniel and I invited her to dinner the following week. It was supposed to be a kind gesture. New friend in town, lonely nights. I can still see that evening clearly. The soft glow from our dining room light, the smell of baked lasagna, the wine Daniel insisted on opening even though we'd been saving it. Renee was full of stories about her travels, her clients, her failed relationships. She made Daniel laugh, really laugh, in a way I hadn't seen in months. At the time, I was happy to see it. I told myself, he needs laughter right now. He's been through so much. She started dropping by more often after that, sometimes with leftover muffins, sometimes just passing through. She and Daniel would talk about his job hunt. She said she had contacts in a marketing firm overseas. I was grateful. When Daniel mentioned she might help him with some freelance consulting, I smiled and said, "That's wonderful." Because that's what supportive wives do, right? They encourage, they trust. I didn't know then that trust would become the rope I'd eventually choke on. A few months later, things started shifting. Subtle, quiet changes that didn't make sense at first. Daniel began spending more time in his study. He said he was working on a proposal for that overseas company. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and hear him typing, whispering on calls. When I'd ask, he'd say, "Time zone differences, babe. Go back to sleep." He grew distant. Not cruel, not cold, just distracted. Like his eyes were always fixed on something far away. When we used to watch our Saturday movies, his phone would buzz. He'd smile faintly and say, "Work stuff." I noticed how quickly he started locking his screen afterward. One afternoon, I came home early from tutoring. He was in the living room, laptop open, typing furiously. When he saw me, he slammed it shut. "Hey," I said, startled. "What's going on?" "Nothing," he replied too quickly. "Just private client stuff." I didn't push, because that's another thing I'd learned in marriage. Sometimes silence is safer than suspicion. Still, the tension grew. Bills began piling up, and I started asking questions. Our savings were thinning faster than expected. He told me he was investing, small projects to bring long-term income. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Until one night, I found the first clue. It was a receipt, tucked between old paperwork on his desk. A luxury watch store. $5,000. Daniel didn't own a watch like that. I remember standing there, the paper trembling in my hands, the room suddenly too quiet. When he came home that evening, I asked. He didn't blink. He said, "It was a client gift, networking." Something in his tone was off, calm, rehearsed. But I swallowed the doubt, smiled, and changed the subject. Later that week, I saw Renee again. She was at the cafe near my school, sitting by the window, sunlight catching her wrist. And there it was, the watch. That same watch. Gold rim, leather strap, glinting like a confession. Our eyes met for a second. She smiled, waved, and my heart sank like a stone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows on the wall. Every memory began replaying with new meaning. The late-night calls, the secrecy, the new cologne he'd started wearing. I wanted to wake him, to ask outright, "Is it her?" But instead, I turned away, because admitting what I already knew would break something I wasn't ready to lose. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Daniel was still asleep beside me, his arm flung across the bed like he owned all the space between us. I stared at him for a long time. His breathing was steady, peaceful, like someone without secrets. It's strange, isn't it? How the person sleeping next to you can be living an entirely different life, just inches away. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. The tiles were cold under my feet. I made coffee, black and bitter, because sugar felt like a lie that morning. When I opened the fridge, I noticed something missing. The envelope where we kept emergency cash. Gone. A ripple of panic went through me, followed by denial. Maybe he'd used it for bills. Maybe he just forgot to tell me. But deep down, that old, familiar voice whispered, "Maya, something isn't right." That evening when he came home, I decided to ask. "Hey, did you take the envelope from the fridge? The one with the cash for the repairs?" He paused, halfway through taking off his shoes. "Oh, that. Yeah, I used it to pay a guy for the plumbing estimate." "Estimate?" I repeated. "We haven't even called a plumber yet." He froze, then smiled faintly. Right, I meant deposit. Sorry, my head's been everywhere. It was such a small lie, wrapped neatly inside a smile, but it changed everything. That was the moment I stopped trusting his words and started watching his actions. Over the next few weeks, I became an investigator in my own home. I watched how he guarded his phone like a secret diary, how he'd step outside to take calls, lowering his voice, how his business trips became more frequent, longer, with vaguer explanations. He said he was flying out for meetings about the overseas job. Sometimes he'd send photos, hotel rooms, airport lounges, city skylines. Except one photo caught my eye. In the reflection of the hotel window, barely visible, was a figure, a woman's silhouette, hair tied up in a bun. Renee always wore her hair that way. My stomach turned cold. Still, I didn't confront him, not yet. Because when you love someone, you want them to confess before you accuse. You want to believe they'll choose honesty over humiliation. But Daniel didn't. He grew bolder. He started talking about big changes coming, fresh starts, exciting opportunities abroad. I smiled, nodded, pretended to share his enthusiasm. Meanwhile, I started looking through our accounts. What I found made my hands shake. The savings account was empty. Every cent we'd scraped together over 10 years, gone. Our emergency fund, the money we'd saved for a down payment on our dream house. The account showed multiple withdrawals over several months, small at first, then larger, each marked under his name. I felt the air leave my lungs. I double-checked, triple-checked. There was no mistake. When he came home that evening, I confronted him. He was humming, carrying takeout in his hands, acting like life was ordinary. "Daniel, we need to talk." He looked up, half smiling. "What's wrong?" "Our savings are gone." He froze mid-step. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, my voice trembling, "the account is empty. Every last dollar. You've been withdrawing for months." He set the bags down slowly, like someone defusing a bomb. "Okay," he said, forcing calm. Just let me explain." "I'm listening." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's temporary. I invested the money. You'll see the return soon. It's for us, Maya. For the move. For the new life. You said you trusted me, right?" I stared at him. "Invested where? In who?" That's when I saw it. The flicker. The hesitation in his eyes before he said, "A business partner overseas." Not what partner? Who? Renee's voice echoed in my mind from that first dinner. "I work with some amazing international clients." I stepped closer. "Is the business partner Renee?" His face changed completely. That mask of calm cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Fear, guilt, anger, all tangled together. "Don't do this," he muttered. "Don't start making up stories." "It's not a story if it's true." He looked away, jaw tightening. "You wouldn't understand. She believes in me. She's helping me rebuild." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "She's helping you with our money? With our home?" He didn't answer. Silence is the loudest kind of confession. The next morning, I woke to the sound of drawers opening. Daniel was packing. I watched him from the doorway. "Where are you going?" He didn't look at me. I need space. I'll be staying with a friend." "Which one?" I asked, even though I already knew. He zipped the suitcase. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Daniel, we built everything together. Our savings, our home, everything. You can't just walk away." He turned, finally meeting my eyes. "Maya, I have to do this. For me." "For you," I repeated, tears stinging my eyes. "What about us?" He paused at the door. For a moment, he looked like the man I used to know. Then he said softly, "Us stopped working a long time ago." And just like that, he was gone. The days that followed blurred together, calls unanswered, messages left unread. I tried to stay busy, teaching, cooking, pretending. But the silence in that house was unbearable. Every creak felt like his ghost. Every shadow looked like the shape of what we'd lost. A week later, I came home to find a for sale sign on our front lawn. I thought it was a mistake. I called the realtor's number printed on it. "Mrs. Lewis?" the woman said cheerfully. "Yes, your husband already signed the sale documents. We're just waiting for the final deposit." My voice caught. "What documents?" "Oh, I thought you knew. He said you were both relocating abroad." My knees nearly gave out. I hung up and ran inside, searching for the papers. That's when I found the open folder in his desk drawer. Legal forms, contracts, signatures. His, not mine. He'd forged my signature to sell the house. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by the pieces of my life, bills, bank statements, photo frames. The walls seemed to close in, every memory mocking me. He hadn't just taken the money. He'd taken our home, our trust, our years. And the cruelest part? He'd done it all for her, the woman I'd invited into our lives with open arms. That's when something inside me shifted. Grief turned to steel. I wasn't going to let him vanish into his fantasy life without consequences. It was time for action. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and a cup of coffee gone cold, making a list. A list of everything he took and everything I was going to take back. First, I called the bank. They told me exactly what I feared. Every withdrawal had been made in person. He transferred the last chunk to a foreign account 2 days before leaving. "Can I get the account details?" I asked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That information is confidential." I smiled bitterly. Of course it is. But then the woman on the line hesitated. After a moment, she said softly, "Ma'am, if you check your joint statements, you might notice a pattern." A pattern. When I checked, I saw it immediately. Each withdrawal had been made in small towns, places near airports. The last one, San Diego International. He hadn't gone far. I drove 6 hours straight, no music, no rest, just my heartbeat and the sound of tires eating miles of highway. By the time I reached San Diego, it was evening. The sky was painted gold and red, the way sunsets look when you're on the edge of something irreversible. I parked outside a small coastal motel, the same one from one of his business trip photos, room 214. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs. Outside the door, I heard laughter, a woman's voice, his voice. I froze. For a second, I almost turned back. But then I remembered the empty savings account, the forged signature, the for sale sign on my lawn. I knocked. The door opened halfway. Renee stood there, barefoot, wearing one of his shirts. Her face changed instantly. Shock, then guilt, then defiance. "Maya," she said, like she'd just seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking for my husband," I said flatly. Daniel appeared behind her, face pale, towel around his shoulders. "Maya, this isn't—" I stepped forward. "Save it. I know everything." Renee tried to block the door. "This isn't what you think." "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like betrayal." For a moment, none of us spoke. The air was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Daniel sighed. "You shouldn't have come here." I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "You stole our money, our home. You think I'd just stay quiet?" "I had no choice," he said, stepping closer. "The business deal fell apart. I owed people money. Renee helped me." "Helped you?" I spat. "You mean she took what we built together?" Renee crossed her arms. "Don't blame me, Maya. He came to me first." I turned on her, my voice low and trembling. "I invited you into my home. I trusted you, and you repaid me by sleeping with my husband and stealing my life." She flinched, but didn't look away. "He was unhappy. You can't cage someone forever." My blood boiled. "Then you can keep the cage, Renee, because I'm about to burn the whole thing down." Daniel grabbed my wrist. "Maya, don't do anything stupid." I stared at his hand until he let go. Then I smiled, calm, cold, dangerous. "Oh, I already did something smart." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The screen showed a hidden camera feed from our living room, a camera I'd set up weeks ago when I started noticing his lies. In the video, Daniel could be heard clearly talking to Renee, discussing the money transfers, the fake documents, the plan to sell the house. Renee's face turned white. You recorded us?" "Every word," I said quietly. "And guess what? Fraud, forgery, theft, they're all crimes." Daniel's expression hardened. "You wouldn't go to the police." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "Try me." The next day, I drove back home and went straight to the authorities. The detective I met didn't say much at first, just listened, then nodded. "You've got solid evidence," he said finally. "We'll investigate." Weeks passed. I thought maybe nothing would happen. Then one morning, I got the call. They'd found Daniel and Renee trying to board a flight to Belize with cash that wasn't theirs. The day of the court hearing, he wouldn't even look at me. Renee sat beside him, mascara streaked, trying to look innocent. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood up. My voice didn't shake this time. "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I want my life back, my peace, my dignity. He took my trust, my money, my home, but not who I am." I looked directly at Daniel. "You thought you could destroy me quietly, but you underestimated silence. It listens, it learns, and one day it speaks." The courtroom was silent. The judge ruled in my favor. The house sale was voided, the accounts frozen, and Daniel was ordered to repay every cent with interest. Renee? She lost her business license for aiding fraud. A few months later, I moved back into the house. It didn't feel like home at first, just walls and echoes of old laughter. But slowly, I started repainting, rebuilding. One evening, I found something while clearing out his old desk. A photo of us from years ago. We were smiling, carefree, standing on a beach, the tide curling at our feet. I stared at it for a long time. Then I set it on fire. Watched the edges curl, turn black, disappear. Some things you don't keep. You let them burn so you can see the light again. Now, when people ask me what happened to my marriage, I smile and say, it ended the moment I found my strength. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. It's strange how silence feels after a storm. Not peaceful, exactly. More like the air is holding its breath, waiting to see if the thunder will return. That's what my house felt like in those first few weeks after Daniel's trial. Too quiet, too still. I'd wake out to the sound of the wind rattling the blinds, and for a moment think he was still there, humming in the kitchen or typing at his desk. But then I'd remember. He wasn't. And neither was the woman who called herself my friend. I spent the first month learning to live alone again. Little things became lessons in strength. Fixing a leaky faucet, driving to the hardware store, learning to cook for one. Each task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Some nights, though, were harder. I'd catch myself replaying everything, the betrayal, the lies, the nights he'd kissed my forehead while hiding secrets in his phone. And each time I'd whisper to myself, you survived it. That's enough. It wasn't revenge that kept me going. It was dignity. It was the quiet decision that I would never again beg anyone to choose me. A few months later, I took a job offer, teaching interior design workshops at a local community college. The pay wasn't much, but the joy was real. On my first day, I stood before a room full of women, many of them older, some divorced, some widowed, some simply starting over. And I said, beauty isn't about perfection. It's about rebuilding what's been broken, piece by piece, until it feels like home again. They clapped softly, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's victim, but as a woman who had something to teach. One evening after class, I stopped by a small cafe. It had a warm glow, the kind that spills out of windows and makes strangers look familiar. As I ordered, the barista smiled. He said, "Are you Maya?" I said, "Yes. I'm surprised. Do we know each other?" He chuckled. "My mother was in your class. She said you helped her redesign her house and her life." I laughed softly. She did the work herself. I just showed her where to start. As I turned to leave, he said, "She said you've been through a lot. I just wanted to say it shows, in a good way, like you made peace with it." For a moment, I couldn't speak because I realized he was right. I had made peace with it, not by forgetting, but by forgiving myself for not seeing sooner. 6 months later, I got a letter from Daniel's lawyer. He'd been sentenced to 2 years with probation after 1. He wanted to meet, to apologize. I stared at that letter for days. Then I decided to go. When I walked into the visiting room, he looked smaller somehow. Not just thinner, smaller in spirit. He gave me a tired smile. "You look good, Maya." I nodded. "You don't." He laughed quietly, rubbing his wrists. I deserved that. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the space. Then he said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry for everything. For the house, for Renee, for making you believe you weren't enough." I looked at him, this man who once held my hand through every dream, who once promised me forever. And I felt nothing. No rage, no sorrow, just a clean, empty peace. "I forgave you a long time ago." I said quietly. He frowned. You did? Yes, but not for you, for me. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. As I stood to leave, I added, Daniel, you didn't just lose me. You lost the version of yourself that could have been good. I hope one day you find him again. Then I walked away, not once looking back. A year later, my workshop turned into a small business, a home restoration studio called Second Light Designs. We helped women rebuild their homes after divorce or loss. Every client came with a story, and somehow their stories helped mine too. Sometimes when I looked around the bright, cozy studio, filled with laughter and paint and new beginnings, I'd think, this is what strength looks like. Not revenge, not power, but peace. One evening, I was invited to speak at a women's conference about resilience. As I stood on stage, lights dimmed, audience waiting, I thought about everything: the betrayal, the courtroom, the quiet nights of grief. And I said, people often ask me how I forgave the man who stole my life. The truth is, I didn't forgive him for him. I forgave him because carrying the pain was heavier than letting it go. Because I realized sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is start over. The room fell silent. Then applause, slow, heartfelt, growing louder. I smiled through tears, not because they were cheering for me, but because I had finally, truly come home to myself. Now when I walk past that old photograph of Daniel and me on the beach, the only one I kept, I don't feel anger anymore, just gratitude. Because if he hadn't left, I might never have found me. Would I change what happened? Maybe once I'd have said yes. But now I see every broken piece led me to something whole. I'm not the woman who begged him to stay. I'm the woman who watched the fire and then built something beautiful from the ashes. And if you're listening, wondering if you can too, you can. When I look back now, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see a turning point. Because the truth is, sometimes God allows things to fall apart so you can finally build something that's truly yours. My husband thought he took everything from me, but in reality, he just cleared the space for me to grow. It took me a long time to understand that healing isn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It's about learning to breathe again, even with the scar, to walk through your own ruins and realize you're still standing.